The only place fear can possibly exist is within the mind. But does fear have to be a bad thing if it's a protective mechanism? How about the world we live in, the practical world, where it would appear that our fear responses is turned on continuously because of a stress inducing society and not because we are being chased by jaguars? The first time I was consciously able to face my fear, that is making the conscious decision, as an adult, was when I was, let's say, a little lucid, mm, doped up. And we all know the paranoia in the States. If you don't, they're pretty bad. And I remember it was a kind of trembling fear of the dark, an age old fear that I had learned at the time I wasn't as over as I had once thought. So in this state, my brain created a bunch of scenarios, such as, what if ghosts really exist and evil spirits and whatnot. And I grew up in Nigeria, and we tend to be really superstitious. Even though I find that a lot of people around the world, I find now that they are also still super suspicious, superstitious. Sorry. And if you're like me, right, and you don't believe in that BS, but subconsciously, right, um, it's like, who really knows, right? Your the brain would echo in the background, like, what if? And also, I was also not in a rational state of mind, which made every fickle idea seem extremely plausible. So fears, right? Fears stop people from thinking rationally and being calm enough to make rational decisions. Most times, in those states that felt where the fear felt real, and emphasis here on feeling real, that it felt real, which is the key word here, is that my fears felt real. And so I would always give in, and kind of run away, in those states. And one day, the day I made the conscious decision, I didn't run though. I stayed. I took a gamble. That's the key word here, a gamble, a risk. That if I did face my fear, if I did stay, what would happen? Would something really bad happen? Obviously, you could guess the answer is, that obviously not. And ever since then, I've been trying because, I don't know, it lit a spark in my brain. And I think that's a very scientific thing, that when you face your fear, you can face more fears. So I had been trying ever since to just face bigger and bigger fears and real fears, and that feel real. And those fears that feel real, they still boggle me down, but it kind of opened my eyes to the thought of, back to the only place fear can exist is within your mind. And so this extreme fear that I had, um of the dark and all the things that were happening that weren't real but felt extremely real to me, made me think how much of my actual fears are, just that, just like fears, like the fear of failure and fear of failing or fear of losing my job, that are real, but then in the state of panic, I can't really tackle them, right? And you find out that the only place that fear does exist is within your mind. And if you didn't have that fear, having the fear literally it has a way. I don't know how to stop enabling you from facing those fears. I don't know the word I wanted to use there. You know, having known that what truly holds most people back from achieving anything in this world are the fears that seem extremely real. And because our fears seem real, we kind of don't want to develop sorry, the necessary skills, the growth mindset needed to actually face those fears and build something of those necessary, necessary as in tools to grow and move through life and to self actualize, or unnecessary cuffs in learning math when you're kind of bad at it and for a grade to succeed and whatever. you know, we tend to want to succeed more at things that we are more naturally inclined to, in a way. Our more natural gifts, and tend to not use tools. Yes, the key it's I keep saying keyword, but yeah, the keyword here is like tools. We tend to fear certain tools and our certain capabilities, right? In a way that it's like, okay, I'm not good at this thing. So victim mindset, I'm not good at this thing, and I will never be good at this thing. When it's kind of like when people are naturally inclined to be good at something, um what also makes them really good is their ability to keep going at it and keep improving on it, because they are not afraid to do so. They are not afraid of this thing. Um, there are barriers, right? There are barriers. I feel as there are barriers with anything that leaves people to unconsciously not be able to self actualize and do things from a more conscious state, because they do not have the because forgive me, because I know a lot of people hate this word, privilege to sit down and do nothing but think. And this is coming from a working, well, not working technically because we don't have a working, but I'm technically working class living in a third world country. So this is coming from me, and I'm sitting down and thinking. And that is in a way, um both a way I can acknowledge my privilege, but also show you that I pretty much have none, or I should have none, you know. I think that on a grand scale, most people's lives, even the lives of the like extremely rich, are this. Everyone in some way um is a victim of their lives, and everyone theoretically should be able to overcome victimhood, because Stevie Wonder is a blind black man, but look at what he is able to do. Look at Oprah. Look at Maya Angelou, who I read, I think, grew up to become a prostitute, and before becoming a writer. Humans are able to overcome, but how many more people, on this grand scale, whether rich or poor, as it tends to be, objectively worse for those who are poorer or blacker or darker, or even dumber. Like, I understand people shouldn't give up, right? And should work very hard to get where they want, to be. But imagine the strength and stamina of a man who keeps being knocked down no matter how many times he gets up. Imagine the millions of blind men that didn't, have maybe the luck or the tenacity if they needed. Luck because Stevie got to where he is maybe before his internal threshold of giving up. was reached, or tenacity, because maybe the problems and barriers facing this other person were more, or let's say they weren't even more. And even though he could have probably overcome with, more tenacity, or Stevie just had, the more fight in him to go on, and the situation wasn't the same. I believe, even as people should try their best, we could also try to meet them where they're at, because how realistic is meritocracy for, you know, just even a human with human follies across the board? You may have come from a rich family, but there's still a part of you that doesn't want to do things that will have you going against the grain, or else face or else face the risk, going against the grain and facing the risk of being ostracized, which is sometimes a feature of the journey to self actualize. And yet, it seems like we also have this biological need to conform, whatever. In conservative spaces, we preach self accountability. I sometimes feel it's, to its own detriment, as it tends to negate empathy as well as self compassion, which I think are much healthier tools for moving someone towards their, growth journey, than belittling them and telling them, it's all their fault and they need to get their lives together. I swear to you, I'm outside and I swear that it's scorpion or a spider. I'm freaked out. you know, what I also didn't realize is that people on the left might, I hear, lack extremely, into the extreme, self accountability. I haven't looked into that much to talk about it, but I'm a leftist. But I believe that to help people, you must first help yourself. And how I believe help in helping people is to help people learn that they can in fact help themselves, because I came out of this quote unquote matrix, and I'm helping myself to be an adult, and to find tools in which I can use to adult in a healthy way and move through life that is not only better for me, holds complex ideas, but I would also think for the betterment of other people as well. I think you need both individual justice, you know um the one you owe yourself, and as well as the collective and social justice, because there is only so much we can do on our own, because we do share this planet. As much as some people want to, I wouldn't say disagree, but find excuses, like it'll take 100 years for us to d- progress, as you see, and all sorts, and that. I think it's all sort of mindset. I get it when Jordan Peterson says victim mindset, everything, that it's all mindset. Like, I get it, but who teaches people these mindsets? I know the struggle it took me to get where I am, and I also, right, completely understand the barriers, the mindset barriers. Like, my mom's never gonna sit down and, do drugs, for instance. Not saying that drugs are cool or good or even bad. I'm not saying that either. But who has time to sit and analyze their fears enough to separate reality from illusions, on really such a massive or deep scale, to figure out who they are, even if it's for the better, in the long run. It's objectively for the better of the individual and as well the society, and it negates societal control, which may not be good for people, as far as history can tell in the long run, as it may only benefit the few. um as I think you can see with like dominance hierarchies in ape societies and the lack thereof in bonobo ones. People create personalities and mindsets given how they were raised and from the people around them and how they were told, and have also internalized to live, which often keeps people stuck in the rut of their lives where they can't even think of social or bigger or long-term problems. Just like in this book that I read, where a doctor had visited the poor parts of her town when she noticed that, and I don't quite remember the details of this story, or of what she was actually, feeding the baby. But a mother wasn't giving her child, according to the doctor, the healthy nutrients she needed to survive as a well brought up healthy child. And I think the doctor, she advised the mother to give her daughter, I think it was porridge, and the mother only exclaimed that she couldn't very well afford it. But you see, the doctor was a bit unmovable herself, because she, as a doctor with all her education and mindset around that education and class, knew that whatever she was feeding the child was going to be worse for her, the child, in the long run, than if she just fed the child, the porridge that she couldn't afford. Quite the dilemma. The child would, just simply have to survive the world with the mindset, quote unquote mindset, she'd been given, because that is all her circumstances could afford her. The mindset to be rich in the long run, or nice or healthy, to stay out of prison, or mental institutions, the mindset to live a sustainable life. All these things she could have learned if maybe she was lucky enough to go to school, you know, because I think information is kind of made locally. Access to information goes a long way, even in shaping one's bone structure, depending on just how much it is, repeated, seen, and they can actually end up internalizing it. And then people say it's a mindset keeping them down, keeping them a victim, keeping them poor, don't label them a victim. Like, you know, I get it, but like, mind mindsets can be so, entrenched in personhood, right? That saying things to people, saying don't label them a victim, sounds like you're kind of doing the right thing um um on the surface, but people are are literally victims of the collective of their mindsets, mindsets that uh, you know aren't available to them. So of course, they're victims. Of course it's a mindset problem, because how many people can afford better ones, you know the inability for the rich, right, to afford an inclusivity in their mindset might be just as bad, as other mindsets on the spectrum of how a person can live and relate to people. And, it's all outside of love. Love, for me, I think, is the only true mindset to which all other true mindsets may and should be formed, in my opinion. There's a lot of misinformation out there. People aren't even privileged enough to have the right type of information, let alone the circumstances needed to make better decisions. And we sometimes can't just ignore the reality of what people are actually going through for like a philosophical ideal. You get? Um, I also think a good mindset is in fact inclusive of a lot of people. I won't say all, but can it really be inclusive of all people's strengths and or weaknesses, as it pertains to the reality of our situation, and inclusive of growth. I feel like that is a good mindset, you know? Yeah. Um, and I think that that when how when mindset is kind of the way we go about it, right, um is where I think that the people versus the ideology mind games really starts to play out, something I would hope to talk about later. And in any case, this is kind of all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. um I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye.